This particular video is going to show you and talk through a while loop and then show you how to convert it to the other types of loops. And so first of all, whenever I start to teach loops, I think of, or I try to discuss the fact that every loop has to have an initialization part. So an init or an initialization. It has to have a guard, and it has to have an update. If it does not have all three of these components, then there is something missing. So when you're dealing with a while loop, the initialization always has to come before the loop. So we declare a variable and we set it to an initial value. You can do that on two separate lines or all on one line like this. The guard is your Boolean expression that determines true or false. So the guard here is number less than or equal to 5. It doesn't include the keyword while. It's this expression. It has to evaluate to a true or a false. In a while loop, if this statement is true, all of the code inside the loop will be executed. And while you're inside the loop, we want to update. And now that I'm looking at this loop, I actually want to output the information, the cout, before the update. So what I want to do is run the loop. As long as the number is less than or equal to 5, I'm going to output the number and then I'm going to update. And we need to update what's called the loop control variable. The loop control variable is the variable that determines or is used to determine whether the loop gets executed again. In this case, the loop control variable is number. And if we go ahead and execute this code, it should print the numbers 1 through 5. It will print 5 because it says less than or equal to. And that would be our first while loop. We can see that it executed as expected. We have the numbers 1 through 5. Now we are going to talk through how would I take that same loop and create or make it a for loop. So same rules apply when you're working with different types of loops. You still have to have the initialization, the guard, and the update. What's nice about the for loop is that the for loop actually has all three of those components built in. So in a for loop, I would do the initialization, and I'll just say num is assigned 1. I will do the guard, num less than or equal to 5. And then I will do the update, let's say num plus plus, which adds 1, all in one succinct statement. And then the body of the loop, everything that goes inside the curly braces, is going to be, actually the only thing I need is my output, because my update is part of this statement up here. So all of those lines of code there should rewrite this current loop into a for loop. I need to change the variable here to num, and if I execute this, then I should get the same output that I got just a minute ago when I ran the loop as a while loop. So my output should be the same. It should be the numbers 1 through 5. So if I wait for my output to process, I get 1 through 5 again. And so the for loop has this initialization part here built into it, followed by a semicolon, the guard, followed by a semicolon, followed by the update. What's kind of important to realize on a for loop is the way that it does execute, meaning the initialization gets done exactly once. So this is the first step. It checks the guard, that's the second step. And then the third step is this. So if I were to number the steps, this happens third. And then it goes up to update as the fourth step, and it never goes back to initialization. Then it checks when I update, num goes to 2, it checks the guard, it prints it out, num goes to 3, checks against the guard, etc. So it keeps cycling through these 3 lines kind of right here. Never goes back to that initialization. And so that's your for loop. If I take the same type of loop and create it as a do while, this one's just a little bit different. The do while is what we call a post-test loop. So the two other loops that we worked with right here, the while loop and the for loop, are what we call a pre-test loop. So the while is a pre-test. The for is a pretest. But now we're going to take a look at a do while. And a do while is a post test. That means the condition for exiting is at the end of the loop. So it's going to go, for example, we're going to do this process basically while num is less than or equal to 5. We want to execute that process. In a do while, we also have a semicolon at the end of the guard. This rarely happens where we have a semicolon at the end of a decision statement like this. And so just be careful of that. It does need a semicolon there. It doesn't like the fact that num is being used because well, first of all, according to it, we haven't defined it because our definition for it is down here. And so just to make life a little bit easier, I am going to create a third variable. It still doesn't like it because it has to be initialized and created. So outside the loop, n is going to equal 1. That matches with what we did down here with the first value being 1. And as long as this particular loop, the difference between a pretest and a post-test is that this loop is going to execute once no matter what. So it is different than these other tests because it doesn't test the condition for continuing until after the loop has executed. If I comment out my other loop, and there should be a way if I go up here and I can comment out a group of lines probably. If I go to edit, again, once I highlight the section and I go to edit and advanced, I should be able to comment out that whole entire block right there. And then we want to output n. So this should execute this. I don't want to say the same. We're going to get the same results, but behind the scenes it does execute a little bit differently, meaning it will always run 1. And apparently I didn't do an update. So let's go. I went back in and I got my update into the code. So that's a classic example of where a mistake can occur. And if we execute now, it should produce the same results as before, and it does. So when you are converting between a pretest and a post-test and or a for to a do while, etc., you're still going to be looking at all three parts. Where's my initialization, my update, and my guard? And just a post-test has it at the end, and a pretest has those the initialization and guard at the beginning.